Good evening. Trump threatens escalation if Iran doesn't reopen Hormuz Strait in 48 hours. What if this 48-hour ultimatum from Donald Trump to Iran isn't really about reopening the Strait of Hormuz at all, but about forcing a global realignment of power under extreme pressure? It sounds dramatic, almost like a conspiracy. But when you step back and analyze the timing, the messaging, and the economic shockwaves already forming, it starts to look less like a reaction and more like a calculated, strategic move. Let me walk you through this, because once you start connecting these dots, you'll realize this situation is far bigger than a simple warning between two countries. On April 5, 2026, Donald Trump issued a direct and aggressive ultimatum to Iran: reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours or face severe escalation. Now, at first glance, this sounds like a classic geopolitical standoff. But the Strait of Hormuz is not just another location on the map. It is one of the most critical arteries of the global economy. Nearly 20% of the world's oil supply, around 18 to 20 million barrels per day, passes through this narrow stretch of water. That means any disruption here doesn't just affect one region, it sends shockwaves across the entire world economy within hours. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The timing of this ultimatum is extremely precise. Early April is not just any period. It marks the beginning of a new financial quarter. Corporations are resetting projections, governments are reviewing budgets, and global markets are already in a sensitive state. By introducing a high-risk geopolitical variable at this exact moment, the pressure multiplies. Oil markets react instantly. Within hours of rising tensions, crude prices surged past $110 per barrel, and in some futures markets, projections began pushing toward $120 if escalation continues. Think about that. A single political statement can move billions of dollars in market value within minutes. But it gets deeper. Because the 48-hour deadline itself is not random, it's a psychological weapon. It compresses time, limits diplomatic maneuvering, and forces immediate decisions. Iran cannot rely on slow negotiations. It must either comply quickly or resist publicly. And both options come with heavy consequences. This is not just diplomacy. This is strategic pressure applied with precision timing. Now let's connect this to the broader economic system. When oil prices spike, the effects ripple outward. Transportation costs increase. Manufacturing expenses rise. Global shipping becomes more expensive. Within weeks, this translates into higher prices for everyday goods. Inflation, which many economies were already struggling to control, gets another push upward. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and others, are forced into difficult decisions: raise interest rates and slow economic growth, or tolerate inflation and risk instability. But here's the part most people don't see. Volatility creates opportunity. Energy companies benefit from higher oil prices. Defense contractors see increased demand as military readiness becomes a priority. Financial institutions profit from market fluctuations. Even commodities traders gain from rapid price movements. So while the public experiences uncertainty, certain sectors experience significant financial gains. And this raises a critical question. Is this escalation purely about security? Or is it also about economic positioning? Because when you look at the players involved, the incentives become clearer. The United States maintains a dominant naval presence in the region through the Fifth Fleet. Iran controls key coastal access points and has invested heavily in asymmetric warfare: fast boats, anti-ship missiles, and drone systems designed to disrupt larger forces. This creates a unique balance where both sides have power, but in very different forms. Now let me walk you further into the timeline. April 5th, the ultimatum is issued. April 6th, global markets begin reacting aggressively. Oil futures spike. Defense stocks climb. Shipping companies start recalculating risk. By April 7th, diplomatic channels are activated behind the scenes. Countries like Oman and Qatar begin quiet mediation efforts. Meanwhile, intelligence agencies increase surveillance in the Gulf region. By April 8th, the 48-hour deadline approaches, and tension reaches its peak. Every hour matters in this window. Every statement from Washington or Tehran is analyzed instantly. Every military movement is tracked. This is not just a political situation. It's a real-time global event affecting trillions of dollars in economic activity. Now here's where it becomes even more complex. Other global powers are watching closely. China, for example, imports a significant portion of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Any disruption threatens its energy security and economic stability. Russia, on the other hand, benefits from higher oil prices and increased Western distraction. European nations face a dilemma. They rely on stable energy supplies, but must also align politically with US-led strategies. Think about that. One narrow waterway is influencing decisions in Beijing, Moscow, Brussels, and Washington all at the same time. But it gets worse, because escalation doesn't require full-scale war. Even limited disruption can have massive consequences. Insurance premiums for oil tankers increase sharply. Some shipping companies may reroute vessels, adding time and cost. Global supply chains, already fragile, face additional strain. Within weeks, consumers around the world begin to feel the impact through rising fuel prices and increased costs of goods. Now let's shift to the political dimension. Strong foreign policy actions often shape domestic narratives. By taking a hard stance, Trump projects strength and decisiveness. This resonates with certain political audiences and can influence broader public perception. With key political milestones approaching later in 2026, including policy debates and electoral positioning, this moment becomes part of a larger strategic narrative. It's not just about Iran, it's about leadership, perception, and control. And if you're starting to see how all these layers connect, this is exactly what we do on ANC News, breaking down complex global events into clear strategic insights that go far beyond the headlines. Now, let's examine the military balance more closely. The U.S. Fifth Fleet has advanced naval capabilities, including aircraft carriers, destroyers, and surveillance systems. Iran, meanwhile, focuses on asymmetric tactics, fast attack crafts, coastal missile batteries, and drone warfare. This creates a scenario where even a small incident, an intercepted vessel, a misfired missile, a drone strike, could trigger a much larger escalation. And here's the key point. Neither side necessarily wants full-scale war. The objective is leverage. The threat of escalation is often more powerful than actual conflict. It allows both sides to push for strategic advantages without crossing a point of no return. But what happens if that balance fails? What happens if one side miscalculates? History shows that many major conflicts begin with small incidents that spiral out of control. A single mistake in a high-tension environment like the Strait of Hormuz could trigger a chain reaction involving multiple nations. Now, let's project forward 3 to 6 months. If tensions remain high, oil prices could stabilize above $100 per barrel, possibly even reaching $130 in extreme scenarios. This would place significant pressure on global economies, particularly energy-importing countries. Inflation could rise again, forcing central banks to maintain higher interest rates for longer periods. Economic growth could slow, and financial markets could become more volatile. At the same time, diplomatic efforts will likely intensify. Back-channel negotiations involving regional players such as Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, and Qatar could play a crucial role. The outcome of these negotiations will shape not only regional stability, but also global economic trends for the rest of the year. And here's where it gets even more strategic. There is a looming mid-year deadline, June and July 2026, when major economies reassess energy policies, strategic reserves, and international agreements. If the Hormuz situation remains unresolved by then, we could see coordinated global actions, including emergency oil releases or new security alliances designed to protect shipping routes. Think about that. A 48-hour ultimatum today could influence global policy decisions months into the future. Now let's ask the bigger question. Is this crisis being used as leverage to accelerate larger strategic goals? Because when you look at the broader picture, energy transitions, shifting alliances, technological competition, it starts to feel like this moment is part of a much bigger transformation. And this is where power dynamics shift again. If Iran resists successfully, it challenges U.S. influence and demonstrates resilience. If the U.S. forces compliance, it reinforces its dominance and sends a message to other nations. Either outcome reshapes global perceptions of power. And perception matters more than most people realize. In geopolitics, perception often drives reality. Allies adjust their strategies based on perceived strength. Rivals test boundaries based on perceived weakness. So the outcome of this 48-hour window could have ripple effects far beyond the immediate crisis. If you're following this closely, you're already ahead of most people, and this is why staying connected with ANC News matters, because we're not just reporting events, we're analyzing the strategies behind them. Now consider the possibility that neither side backs down. The deadline passes. Tensions escalate. Markets react sharply. Diplomatic pressure intensifies. In this scenario, uncertainty becomes the dominant force. And in global systems, uncertainty is often the most dangerous variable of all. Because uncertainty leads to overreactions, miscalculations, and unintended consequences. And that brings us to the final phase of this analysis. What happens next? Will this situation de-escalate through quiet diplomacy? Or will it evolve into a prolonged standoff that reshapes global power structures? The answer is not clear yet, but the indicators suggest that we are entering a period of heightened tension, strategic positioning, and economic volatility. As we move deeper into 2026, every development in this story will carry weight. Every movement in the Strait of Hormuz, every shift in oil prices, every diplomatic statement will be part of a larger narrative unfolding in real time. And here's the final question you need to think about. Is this ultimatum the beginning of resolution, or the opening move in a much longer geopolitical confrontation? Because if current patterns continue, this moment will not be remembered as just another news headline. It will be remembered as a turning point, a moment when global dynamics began to shift in a very visible and very consequential way. This is not just a crisis, it is a signal that the balance of power is being tested, that economic systems are under pressure, and that strategic decisions made in the next few days could shape the global landscape for months, even years to come. And if you want to stay ahead of these developments and truly understand what's happening behind the scenes, make sure you stay connected with ANC News, because we will continue to track every move, every escalation, and every strategic shift as it happens. Because this is just the beginning. The geopolitical chess match is only getting started, and ANC News will continue tracking every development.